The story moves slowly in the seventh episode of Masters of the Air, contrasting the POW's tangible sense of dread with acts of bravery and devotion. Lieutenant Rosenthal's choice to increase his assignment to 30 missions is a turning point, demonstrating both the fortitude and the gravity of leadership as Major Egan and Gail Cliven consider fleeing and deal with the danger of being discovered. In this episode, Major Egan and Gail Cliven struggle with the precarious possibility of escaping the cramped POW camp. A tangible sense of dread permeates the mood and is expertly integrated into every scene. The stillness takes on a life of its own, expressing the unvoiced anxieties and doubts that the imprisoned pilots are constantly experiencing. The opening scene of the seventh episode of Masters of the Air shows Bucky and the other POWs going about their daily lives in Stalag Luft 3. Although it's not made particularly clear, they consume cats to get their daily protein fix. They can determine whether the Nazis are as strong as they seem by using their homemade radio to hear the status of the conflict. An inspection breaks that, and the radio is taken away. Rosie Rosenthal returns to Thorpe Abbotts and takes on the role of training the new hires. Conveniently, Quinn and Bailey triumphantly return and are dismissed. That's because they have too much knowledge of the French and Belgian resistance. In the event that the Nazis capture them once more on the battlefield, they will most likely be interrogated until they divulge important information about what is going on right in front of their eyes. What on earth transpired in France? How on earth did the anxious Quinn navigate Nazi-occupied areas without experiencing another meltdown? How did the girls fare? Not sure. This is not discussed in any way in the show. It seems likely that it was left on the cutting room floor because these two supporting characters had enough time on screen in the earlier episodes to warrant a meaningful comeback. But I'll be giving the writers a pass if I do that. Thus, I will state that it is quite plausible that poor writing was used in this instance. Crosby and Rosie talk about how pilots and their crews have a certain number of flights to complete before they are permitted to return home. Rosie gets set to launch a bombing run on Berlin, which has reportedly already been struck several times, but she is told to back off. Even if they hit their objectives, the mission is only partially successful because they incur severe casualties and heavy losses. The Americans nevertheless continue to deploy more young soldiers to Berlin in spite of this. In the midst of all of this, by the way, Crosby cheats on Westgate. How did they transition from being close friends to having sex together? I'm clueless. Is he written this way, or is this arc still on the editing room floor? In any case, this is poor storytelling. I'm not sure. As Buck and Bucky are discussing how to get raw materials to create another radio, the bombing in Berlin cuts them off. The joy is short-lived, though, as a vicious dog mauls one prisoner and the Nazi guards shoot another. This gives Bucky a sense of urgency, and he begins to gather the pieces he needs for his radio. Buck discloses that he has proposed to Marge while they are waiting and getting ready for their next move, which serves as his inspiration to escape the hellhole unscathed. As Crosby is composing letters of sympathy for the departed, Kid tells them he needs to plan a course for another bombing flight over Berlin. After learning of this from Lieutenant Colonel Bennett, the airmen express their disapproval of these missions in a loud manner. Bennett gives them his word that he will be in the air with them. The arrival of the P-51 Mustangs, which are just as quick and deadly as the Nazi fighter jets, undoubtedly makes a difference, though it's unclear if it will allay the airmen's fears. When the B-17s drop their bombs on Berlin, the Mustangs are able to repel the Nazis. The crew of Rosie triumphantly returns. Kid tells him that because he completed 25 missions, he can return home. However, there is now a 30-mission quota. Therefore, it is mandatory for the new recruits and those who haven't completed 25 missions to stay and complete 30 bombing runs. Schewens becomes enraged by this and gives Kid a hard time about how they are being sent to die thoughtlessly. In Masters of the Air, there is an imbalance between criticizing and appreciating war. Moments such as the one in which Schewens chastises Kid don't receive the same amount of screen time as moments that are more action-packed and feel more motivating. I know this is propaganda, but it's absurd that people are acting like this is a high-profile program that's aiming to win an Emmy or something. Following all of this, Crosby and Westgate have yet another romantic session. Given that Crosby is meant to serve as the audience proxy, this entire journey is incredibly strange and uncomfortable. And without warning, it comes out that he is an infidelity. He is married, incidentally. So how am I meant to interact with him? I doubt that all of this was done by the Harry Herbert Crosby of real life. If so, perhaps he wasn't the best choice to serve as the show's narrator and audience stand-in. I wonder why this is even a story point if he didn't. Episode 7 of this show has demonstrated more than any other that the writers and producers paid no attention to the writing or the storytelling in favor of securing well-known performers and historical accuracy. Either way, Buck's radio is broken. Hence, Bucky advises that rather than waiting for assistance to arrive, they should devise a plan to leave the area. Buck claims he wants to get back to Marge in one piece, so he doesn't want to take a chance. So he gives it another go and manages to get his radio operating again. Later, following a late-night check, Bucky, and the other captives find out that the British detainees appear to have attempted to break out by excavating a tunnel for more than a year. Now that this has been uncovered, it is evident that the number of inspections will only rise, which will reduce Buck's opportunities to accomplish anything significant with that homemade radio, or to wait for assistance to come. A call to meet Simulite interrupts Buck and Bucky's discussion about leaving the Stalag Luft III at the conclusion of Masters of the Air Episode 7. The Americans are told by the Nazi jailer that 50 of the British escapees were apprehended again and put to death. He says this in an effort to demoralize the Americans and prevent them from trying a similar jail escape. But that's not all. According to Simulite, he wishes to count every Jewish person in the American camp. To convey that they do not distinguish between different POWs, the American camp colonel claims that they are all Americans. Simulite reiterates the Gestapo's and the SS's position on the killing of Jews, demonstrating that it is evident that he dislikes hearing no. At last, Buck understands that Bucky's plans to try to flee are preferable to his own, since the longer they wait, the worse the Nazis will treat them, because the one thing they have perfected is inhumanity. Rosie Rosenthal, back at Thorpe Abbotts, can't stand to sit back and watch his fellow airman die, so he asks Bennett to re-enlist him rather than send him home. There's a catch. Bennett is prepared to accept his proposal. The current tactic seems to be that the German planes need to be lured, even though the Mustangs are more than capable of defeating the Luftwaffe. The B-17 bombers will supply that bait. This means that in order to allow the Americans time to fire back, the bombers must take off without a clear target, so that they might be fired at by the Germans. It's a suicide mission, and Rosenthal accepts this tactic without hesitation. It appears like Rosenthal is prepared to give it his all, though I'm not sure if this is a result of his treatment sessions. He wants to spend the next 5 flights with his fellow airmen. He is done lounging. Perhaps the outcome of Rosenthal's wager will become clear in the next 2 episodes. Finally, Masters of the Air Episode 7 captures the delicate dance of imprisonment and the unwavering commitment of those in service, weaving a tapestry of dread and determination. A complex narrative environment is created by the careful examination of the POW camp, Lieutenant Rosenthal's valor, and the subtly revealed end of the war. The series' climactic moments are made more challenging by the long build, which also adds to the immersive atmosphere. We are getting closer to the final chapters and more excited about a touching conclusion. With its unwavering dedication to genuineness and human complexity, Masters of the Air keeps rising as the countdown to the series' final picks up steam.